bit of Waterfowl ID. Whether you're new to Waterfowl ID or you've been doing it a while, hopefully we'll share some tips and tricks to identify birds both sitting on the water or on land and in flight that will help you all when you're either hunting or birding. I'm going to go ahead and hit the record so I can record this to my machine as a backup. Okay. All right, so you'll notice that down at the bottom of the page, you'll see a little chat box. You can use that to either send questions or comments, whatever you want. You can choose who sees your message with the little drop-down box next to your name. You can send it to just us, just to anybody in the chat, whoever you want to, and we'll try to make sure we get to answer all those here on the air while we're doing this live. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick it off. The first slide here.
Can you guys see it okay?
Yep.
All right, cool.
And I should mention most of these photos that we used in this presentation, they're from Ryan Askren, very accomplished, well, probably a photographer of a lot of species, but as far as we're concerned, waterfowl photographer, one of the best ones in Illinois. So he was nice enough to share a bunch of pictures with us, and we get to enjoy them here in this webinar, and they're going to help us out. But a little bit of an introduction. I'm Curtis from Illinois Learn to Hunt. We've also got Lauren with us here today. But the star of the show, it's not us, it's the ducks. We're going to talk about IDing dabblers versus divers. We're going to go into all the common species of ducks and geese that we can see right here in Illinois. And then we're going to have a little quiz at the end that hopefully you all studied for. It's gonna be Latin names, first and last, spelling counts. You got to get 100% to no, I'm just kidding. It's just be a fun little quiz at the end to see if we learned anything. Hopefully we do. All right, so this on the right-hand side, you're going to see a list. These are all the common ducks for Illinois. Now, most people are going to split all the ducks up into just dabbling ducks versus diving ducks. And for ID purposes, that's a great way to do it. Because if you know which side that's on, right side or left side, guess what? You eliminate half of the potential species. That's great, because when you look down that list, it can be intimidating. We've got a lot of different species of ducks, and if you are trying to ID something out of that total list, it's a little bit scary. If you cut that list in half, it becomes much less scary for most people. So you're doing yourself a huge favor if you can do that, and we're going to teach you a few tricks to do that. And then on the left-hand side of this, we've got just some of the different parts of a duck. Now these will come in handy just as we're talking about ID when we go through the species accounts, but one of the main things notice is the wing speculum, this is only found on puddle ducks, well, dabbling ducks, but really only the puddle ducks of the dabbling ducks. And that's some specialized feathers in their secondaries that are actually iridescent. So because it's iridescent, that means that pigment is not actually in the feather itself. That's a structural color. And so it can actually change depending on where the feather is in relation to your eye, in relation to the sun or the light source. So that coloration can kind of change a little bit. We'll be talking about wing speculums a lot. Other than that, primaries, the rump, retrices or tail feathers. Some people will also call wing feathers remiges. We won't talk about that, but we won't need most of that other. Most of you know probably breast and flank. We may talk about that, but most of that other stuff we're not going to not going to need, because we're really going to focus on how shape and general impression of size and shape together can help you identify most of the ducks that we have in Illinois, and at least get it down to where there's only a handful that you're trying to pick from. With that, we can go to the next slide here. All right, dabblers versus divers. So this first slide, really what I want to point out is this composition. So what we've got here, on the left is a dabbler, on the right is a diver. Forget about what species it is right now, and just assume that dabblers, prototypical on the
Oh,
left.
Curtis, I think you moved away from your microphone.
I'm standing in the same spot. Can you hear me now?
Yes, but you're faint.
Oh, okay. I'll turn everything all the way up. Any better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Dabblers versus divers. Compositionally, this is the best thing that's really going to help you cut that list down into half is look at the size of the wing in relationship to the body. And so these yellow bars that I have drawn on here, these are the same size bars. So I put one that's the exact size of the wing and then one next to the body. And what you can see is with dabbling ducks, the wing, it almost looks like one single wing could completely block out that entire duck's body. Okay, and on the diver, over there on the right, look at that. You can tell that that is absolutely not the case. There is no way that you can take one of those little bitty wings and cover up that entire butterball body. Okay, this is pretty standard across all dabblers and all divers because dabblers have a much larger wing to body size ratio. So this makes them look larger, and conversely, it makes divers look smaller. They also have to beat their wings faster and a little bit more shallow because they're the smaller wings than dabblers. So it gives them kind of a unique flying characteristic flight. And a lot of people, when they see divers, even large divers like canvasbacks, which can be, you know, the same size as mallards, they give the impression that they're almost like teal or widgeon size because they have this smaller wing, especially if you're used to looking at mallards with that big, huge wing signature. Now, beyond the wing, another thing that we can look at is those feet. Diver ducks have feet that are positioned really far back on the body, which that's great for diving deep underwater. Not real great for walking on dry land, but a lot of times you can see this when they come in close. Now, mallards or any dabbler duck, they'll have their feet extended when they're landing too, but look how far up they are. It looks like if you were to swipe the duck with a sword right behind the feet of the mallard, you're going to be taking some flesh with you. But on the diver, if you look at that guy over there, if you were to swipe behind his feet with a sword, you might only be getting feathers. So now I'm not encouraging anybody to go be swiping at any ducks with any swords or anything like that. That is not an approved method to take in Illinois. I'm just saying that that composition of where their feet are in relation to their body is also going to help you to identify what that bird is. And this is before it's ever touched the water or done anything else. This is just the general shape. We can go to the next slide here. All right, so dabbling ducks take off straight up. This is another thing. If you are jumping ducks, or if you do see them take off from the water, dabbling ducks generally, they use their feet that are positioned further up in their body. They push their wings down against their water, and they jump off the water using their wings and their feet, and they're aloft, and they can immediately fly with their nice big wings, especially if they have any bit of headwind coming at them. They're in the air. Another thing that dabbling ducks, now they can dive, so don't think that they absolutely can't dive at all. But when they're feeding, they're generally just tipping up. So you'll see the front half of the bird go underwater, and we'll have a picture of this here in a second. But the back half stays above the water most of the time. There he is right there. So generally, dabbling ducks, what they're looking for when it comes to feed is they need their food to be within about a foot to 18 inches of the surface of the water. So a giant big lake that's 30 foot deep, it doesn't matter how much food that lake has, most of that food is not available to our dabbling type ducks. This is why they really prefer marsh, emergent wetlands that have shallow water, and hopefully that water continues to rise throughout the season. Because what happens then is it continuously rises into new food, and the ducks can continuously access new and new food throughout the season. So in a perfect world, that's what we get. Weather in Illinois is not always super conducive to that, but that's what we're hoping for. We can go to the next slide here. Nice clear water there. We're not going to see much water like that while we're duck hunting. Now, diving ducks, on the contrary, look at that. Just a beautiful golden eye running across the water. You see that step, 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 step. So he has to run across the water to get enough lift under his wings to take off. So this is true amongst all the diving ducks. They've got those smaller wings. They've got feet further back. For most of them to take off, they need to run along the water. You're also going to see birds like coots do this. Any bird that has small wings to their body size, this is what they have to do in order to get aloft. Now, the one caveat is if there's a really, really hard headwind, sometimes they can just kind of take one step and they're going. But with lighter wind, it may take 10, 12, 15, 20 steps. You know, you'll see them run across the water for a good long ways before they get up in the air sometimes, which is kind of fun to watch. Also, they do sit lower in the water than puddle ducks, so if you see them at a distance, a lot of times diver ducks will look a little smaller just because they're sitting in the water a little deeper. And here's some examples of how diver ducks feed. They actually do dive completely under the water. Now, just like puddle ducks or dabbling ducks can dive under, of course, diving ducks can tip up to feed as well if there is food right next to the surface. But this is what they're really specialized in, is they're going to dive deep under the water, exploiting food surfaces that are exploiting food sources that are too deep for the puddle ducks to take advantage of. And when it comes to ducks like the canvasback and redhead, wild celery and different vegetative matter like that is some of their favorites. So just because they're diving ducks, that does not mean that they eat more animal matter than puddle ducks do. And when it comes to canvasbacks in particular, back in the market hunting days, they were pretty unanimously the highest priced duck in the markets. So they were the highest prized duck for their meat, and guess what? That's a diving duck. So definitely don't assume that diving ducks taste worse than puddle ducks, because a lot of people are going to consider your canvasback the king in more ways than one. We can go to the next slide here. All right, start off with wood duck, one of our favorites. And I'll, Lauren, if you could go ahead and hit that sound, we'll listen to them. Very diagnostic. Now, that was a short little clip, but that's all you need. When you're duck hunting and you hear that high-pitched whistle like that, here in Illinois, it's a wood duck. Here in the Midwest, that's the only kind of duck that's going to make a sound like that. And usually you do hear them first and then you see them. Wood ducks are basically notorious for flying at very first shooting light and probably after shooting time in the evening time. But so they like to fly early and late, most of the time we're not seeing good colors. Obviously, this is one of our most handsome birds in terms of colors. I mean, just gorgeous. But most of the time when we are seeing these fellas in hunting scenarios, they do not look like that because it is early morning, not in full sun. And the wood duck, which is actually it's a perching duck. So a little bit different. We call them dabbling ducks, of course, but they're a little bit different than the true puddle ducks, the mallards and the teal and the widgeon. They don't have a true speculum. Instead, wood ducks being in the perching ducks, their entire back is basically covered with iridescent plumage. So they almost have iridescent speculum over a lot of the back of their body. So they do have it in their secondaries like you do see in that drake, but they've also got it across their back, they've got it across their face. You can see iridescence all over the place in wood ducks. Even the females, which is that picture there in the center, they have iridescence all over the place. But forget about that iridescence when it comes to ID and hunting situations, because most of the time you're going to have to focus on that structure. And look at that crest. It's almost always visible. Usually you can see the white bars. The white bars stand out even when most of the color doesn't. White tends to stand out pretty good. So those two white bars on the face and neck stand out pretty good. Another thing I like to look for is the squared off tail, and you kind of see that tail there. It's a rounded squared, but it's much more squared off than all the other like the puddle ducks that we look at. Most of them have not a pintail like a northern pintail, but they're in kind of a fan shaped where the tail feathers get longer as you get closer to the center. And in wood ducks, that's not the case. It's usually just that nice, beautiful squared off tail. Another thing, since wood ducks fly through the trees all the time, they tend to move their head all over the place when they're flying, and they're pretty much the only duck that does that. So if you don't hear them whistling, look for that shape, and that should really help you to ID the bird. Seeing the iridescence, you're going to be lucky if you see that. It takes some sunlight or direct light on the bird. Otherwise, most of the time, they appear just dark or pretty much black on their backside, and then of course lighter on the bottom side in flight.
We do have a
Now we can go to
question.
the next bird.
We do have
Oh
a wood
yeah.
duck question. Are they as tasty as they are beautiful?
Yeah, I would say so. They're one of my favorites. Wood ducks are, and because they're perching ducks, they've actually got like thicker legs than most of the other ducks. So they've got like a fat little leg too. So you definitely want to save those wood duck legs. You got to cook them a little bit different than the breast because they've got all that connective tissue in there. Generally, low and slow is better for the legs, and hot and fast better for the breast. But absolutely, wood ducks are not as big as mallards, but in my opinion, they're a little bit better than mallards. And most people, like, mallards is the standard for a good duck. I feel like wood duck and pintail, in my opinion, are a little bit better than mallard. Nothing wrong with mallard, absolutely, but a special place in my heart for wood duck probably too, because I grew up on Quiver River in Missouri. That's the only duck that we had there, so that was the first duck that I ever tried. And yeah, very good on the dinner plate. Good bird all the way around. No complaints. Good job, wood duck. All right, A sponsa is the Latin name for those keeping score at home. Now we're on to the American widgeon. I love this duck. This duck is so falconers even have a term where they'll say a bird has widgeoned me, or they'll say he's pulling a widgeon, and that's because widgeon and teal do this thing where if a bird of prey comes by, most birds flush. These two birds are so small and they know they're not going to win the race, they get back on the water and they'll actually try to fend off the bird on the water, ducking low to the ground or ducking low to the water, knowing that the falcon doesn't itself want to get in the water. And They're pretty successful at that, and a lot of falconers actually have to like call their birds off of widgeon and teal because they're just ungettable, which is a funny little caveat. But let's listen to that sound, Lauren. And it pops up here, another very diagnostic. Yeah, that whistling in there, that's the Drake widgeon, very diagnostic. Usually you'll hear that before you see them. I think it kind of sounds like they're whistling who me who me who. That's what you would say into your whistle call if you were trying to make a widgeon call, is something like that, who me who. But this bird, now look at the tail shape. This is our prototypical tail shape for most of our puddle ducks, which we call fan shaped. Okay, so the feathers are longer the closer you get to the center, giving them kind of a little pintail, a mini pintail. Not as pronounced as our northern pintail, which we'll get to here soon, but that's your very typical puddle duck tail. So on a widgeon, that doesn't tell you much of anything, but look at how white that breast is. White, clean breast with a nice line going to the dark breast, and then a sharp, abrupt change going to the white belly. That stands out big time if you can see it, and it really is more pronounced on widgeon than most other ducks you're going to see. Now, if you get to see it from the side or the back, that big white wing patch on the males, absolutely diagnostic, and it stands out way more than anything on the head. You know, a lot of people get bogged down with duck ID because they start thinking, oh, widgeon, I got to remember that's got the green stripe over the eye, and then it's got a white forehead, and then it's kind of checkered, and then it's got a blue bill. Forget about all that stuff. You don't need to know any of that stuff. Just remember, it's the only puddle duck that has a giant white blob on the front hand part of its, on the leading edge of its secondaries, right in the middle of its wing there. You remember that. And that's about the only thing you need to know it's a widgeon. Couple that with the fact that they are very vocal, and most of the time you're going to hear that sound, you're going to know widgeon are present. Now, we don't have a picture of a female here because we didn't wind up with a good one. They do not have the big white wing patch. But on them, if you get used to what the drake looks like, the female's bill looks exactly like the drake. And it's a small duck with a very blocky head and that short little blue bill, black beak. So the hen is fairly diagnostic too, but with all ducks, the drake is going to be much easier to ID than the hen. And people like to take pictures of the drakes more than the hen because they have more striking colors. So easier to find pictures of drakes than hens. But hens can be taken too. The only species where it matters as far as limits go is the mallard, where we can generally only get 2 hen mallards. So you can go to the next slide. I think mallard might be next up, actually.
Almost.
Oh, not quite. Here we go. Mallard's cousin. This is actually a rare duck in Illinois, so not unheard of at all. We certainly get several black ducks every year, and so this is a duck that we have a chance at, but this is kind of like an Illinois trophy duck. Okay, this is a East Coast duck, and much more common on the East Coast, and this is a cool bird. I've never harvested one. I've only ever seen one hunting, and the best ID that I can tell you is it's much darker than a hen mallard, but it's going to resemble a hen mallard. A lot of times they're going to fly with mallards. The biggest identification factor in flight is how abrupt of a change it is from their underwing to their body. So American black duck is absolutely the darkest duck on the sides and belly. Almost all ducks, except for like northern shoveler, are lighter on their belly than they are on their top. So really easy to ID. Black duck is the only one that's uniformly dark, and then it contrasts big time with that really white underwing And obviously, you can tell it's a black duck, not a mallard, even if you only have one. You could be like, well, it could be tough. If it's got a yellow bill and it doesn't look like a Drake mallard, guess what? This late in the year, that's not a Drake mallard. It's probably a black duck, or it could be a black duck cross, which is really common with mallards. But remember, hen mallards, well, we haven't done the hen mallard yet. We will here soon, but it has an orange bill. So if it doesn't look like a Drake mallard, but it's got a Drake mallard bill, you're probably dealing with a black duck cross, or it's potential it could be a mottled duck situation too, but those are much less common in Illinois than black ducks. They sound just like mallards. Which mallards is our next now? Here we go, mallard. This is everyone's favorite. Let's go ahead and listen to them. Your prototypical hen mallard there. So, one cool thing about ducks is that they not only look different, males and females, but they also sound different. So they actually have different syrinxes, and that's the bird's version of the larynx. So that's how they make their noise. It's different in males and females. So the female, like that mallard, she quacks. The male actually makes a I'll kind of try to do it with my mouth. I can't do it great, but it's more of like a garbled whistle. Kind of sounds like much, much vastly different than the hen mallard's quack. And that's true of all these ducks. The drakes sound different than the females, which is pretty cool. But anyway, most people know what a Drake mallard looks like. That green head is prototypical, it's unmistakable. But what I really want to talk about is what makes a hen mallard a hen mallard. And look at that hen mallard there. She is in all her beauty. People will call them Susies. Look at her basically underside. Look at how much lighter that is than the black duck. There's really no confusing the two when you see that, but when you look at the back of the wing, mallard's got a blue speculum. Beautiful blue speculum. Mallard always has that blue speculum is outlined in white, top and bottom. See those big white bars on the top and bottom of that blue speculum? That tells you that's a mallard. That's a normal hen mallard. If those white bars are absent, we're starting to get into either black duck or mottled duck territory. So, yeah, that's the biggest thing you're looking for. Everything else, mallard is the typical duck. So get used to the size, the speed, the shape of a mallard, and use that to compare everything else to is the best way to do it. Because honestly, when we're out there duck hunting, probably 60 to maybe as many as 95% of the ducks we see are mallards. So get used to that and know when it's not a mallard, and that's really gonna help you out. And for me, and we don't, this is not a video, obviously, still picture, but watch mallards and watch how deep they beat their wings. Their whole body stays almost completely still. They go up a little bit, up and down as they beat their wings, but they beat their wings really deep, up and down deep, and the whole duck is very direct, moving from point A to point B in a very direct way. With mallards, notice that, and then as you start to watch other ducks, you'll see how they differ from that. For example, how teal are not direct at all. There's no A to B. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's all over the place. There's no direct travel. And then you'll see birds like all the diving ducks. They beat their wings way less shallow, but way quicker, making them look smaller. And so once you get that good idea of how a mallard flies, what it looks like, that's going to help you more with ID than knowing where all the colors are on all these ducks, for sure.
We do have a question. So you covered distinguishing a black duck versus a mallard hen, but how do you know if it's a hybrid? Is it just sort of you're kind of in between?
Yeah, so
Any
hybrids can
tips?
run the gambit of everything in between. And so, in general, what I always tell people, technically, if it's a hybrid, it does not count as the limit of either your black duck or your mallard, technically. But what I always encourage people to do, what I would do myself if I was hunting and I got what was a hybrid, I would count it in whatever is the most strict limit. So I would say, well, I'm just going to count this as a black duck, and that's just because if I am to encounter a CPO, I don't want to have to explain that this is a hybrid. I'm just going to be like, yep, I counted as a black duck, and that way, if I count it as the one that's the most restrictive, even if the game warden counts it as something else, I'm going to be okay. But how you can tell is, yeah, it's going to be different. And with mallards, it's going to be the absence of that white around the ring, around the speculum of the wing. Um, it's going to be way darker, so that's going to stand out. But mottled ducks aren't darker, so it's going to be right down to that white. If it's mottled ducks have, I believe, just a really faint, thin, it's almost not there, white on one side of the speculum, not on the other. So that's what it comes down to. So if there's any question, you want to take a really good picture of that speculum, take a really good picture of the body, count it in whatever is the most strict limit that it could count for, and make sure you don't cross any limits. And then uh, you can definitely post that to like a Facebook group, a waterfowl group, something like that for ID. But most of that stuff, it's people just giving you their impression by what it looks like. But usually people have encountered it. The hybrids are, I've never got one myself, but I have seen a mallard pintail hybrid one time. So they definitely do exist. Seen lots of people post hybrid pictures, so it's possible. But most people are never going to encounter them in their life. So not a not a big thing that happens a lot, but on to Gadwall, and we can listen to the sound here because this is another one super diagnostic and you hear it all the time. Sounds like a little duck burp. That's all it is. So a lot of times you'll hear that them mixed in with mallards and other birds. This is a common duck, definitely common duck in Illinois. They even seem more common than they are because gadwall are what duck hunters like to call decoy happy. So this is the opposite of mallards. Mallards are famous for they see your decoys, they hear your calling, they're going to circle 10, 12, 14, 16 times maybe before they decide to land. And guess what? If you mess up any time in any one of those circles, they're gone. That makes them difficult. Gadwall almost never circle. They see your decoys and woo, they just zoom right in. So they're really good at giving a duck hunter confidence. They're not exactly what I would call the wariest of the ducks out there, but hey, they're a beautiful bird. They don't taste bad. So what's not to love, right? But some people will call this the gray duck for obvious reasons. It's more or less, when you look at it, it's a little more plain, I guess, at first look than a lot of our ducks. But if you really look close, wow, this is a handsome, striking bird. And the one there in the center really portrays that pretty good. That's just a beautiful Drake Gadwall. But they get these awesome kind of oranges colors that lay across their back and just give them this kind of, I don't know, regal appearance. So I think it's a good looking bird. It's definitely one we encounter a lot, and it's our only puddle duck with a white speculum. So anytime you see white on the wing of a bird, you got it. This is a puddle duck. It's got your standard wedge fan shaped tail. But you see any white on the wing that looks like it has very defined edges, like a white square, that is a gadwall. That's the only bird that has that. If you remember back to the widgeon, he's got a white splotch on his wing, but it's anything but square, right? That's like an amoeba shape. It's like a semi-round, not clear edges, much different than the gadwall. Now, when they're on the water, the drakes have really dark rear ends, dark back end. Yeah, there's the widgeon's white patch. So nothing, not square there. You can't confuse that for a square. But the gadwall, you look at that and you're like, yeah, that looks kind of like a white square. It's really more of a triangle if we're being very, or not triangle, I mean rectangle if we're being exact, not a square. But it looks like it could be close to a square. I haven't measured. It's got to be close. But that dark butt on the drakes really stands out when they're on the water. That's pretty diagnostic if you see a nondescript duck, but really dark butt. And gadwall have those yellow feet. So we don't have a good picture of a hen here. Some people might ask, how do you tell the difference between a hen gadwall and a hen mallard? Well, it's quite a bit smaller, but you're also going to have those yellowish feet rather than the darker orange feet. Also going to have that darker bill rather than the orange bill. And then gadwalls are about 2/3 the size of mallards, so they're going to be smaller as well. And then even the females have the white speculum, so it's not going to be quite as bright or as pronounced as the drakes, because the drake has that nice rusty and black that surrounds it that really helps it pop. But she's got it too. Now I think we're getting into the smaller ducks, the teal. Oh, northern pintail, I forgot.
Next is shoveler.
Oh,
Black
shoveler.
pintail.
Northern shoveler, then northern pintail. All right, so northern shoveler, this is a small duck, just a little bit bigger than the teal. So this is closer to the size of a teal than a mallard, much smaller. But obviously the biggest diagnostic thing about this duck is the bill. Whether it's a drake or a hen, they've got this huge spatulate bill. And I always like to say, I took a guy hunting for the first time, and the first duck we saw was a shoveler, and he said, "Hey, here's a shovel," or no, he didn't say shoveler. He said, "Here comes a duck, and it's got something in its mouth." So it kind of looks like it's carrying something in its mouth because it's got a bigger, heavier bill than you're used to seeing. So northern shoveler. Other diagnostic things are, I mentioned this before, but this is like our one duck that has a dark belly. Really dark belly, but then a white breast. So almost gives the illusion that the head is like floating out in front of the bird when they're flying around. But this is a late year shoveler. Most of the shovelers we see this early are probably not going to look that dark. But once we start getting into December, definitely start looking like that. And a late season, shovelers are really a handsome bird. They're not known to be the best table fare. Not saying they're bad. They are a puddle duck, but they probably do eat the most animal matter out of all the puddle ducks, and they have a tendency to like sewage ponds. So, take that for what it's worth. Oh yeah, let's listen. I almost forgot about this noise because you're probably only going to hear that in spring. You're not usually going to hear them do that in the fall. Now the females do have a quack that's just kind of a little. It's more of like a high-pitched quack than the mallards that you'll hear sometimes, but the northern shoveler is not a big-time vocal bird, not at all. And now northern pintail. This is one of my favorite birds. One of my favorite to eat, one of my favorite to look at. Really hard bird to decoy. These birds like to circle like mallards, but they're even, I would say, more particular about where they like to land than mallards. So sometimes I've definitely been hunting before and you just see pintail, 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 and you're just looking for any other kind of duck. because you've lost all your confidence in working pintails and you just want to see anything else. So I've been there before. It's a hard duck to hunt. Beautiful bird, awesome to eat. All these things together make it my favorite duck. Let's listen to what they sound like. I think we've got the drake kind of whistle peeps here. Nope, that's his little rolling peep. That's the drake there. The female does have a quack. Now with pintail, look at that shape. This is the longest, skinniest duck. They look very, I would say, acute. They look very fast. They look very aerodynamic. They look very angular. They look a little bit different than all the other ducks. Just look at those pintail in flight. They look slender. It's hard to explain other than that. Even the female, which is the duck in the upper right picture that's below the drake there, even her, you see that shape. She's slender. She looks long and skinny. Very diagnostic to the pintail. Now these drakes, obviously this is late in the year. This is probably taken in spring. They don't get that long pintail this early in the year. That will be probably towards January. Right now they'll have a short, maybe just like a 2-inch little pintail there, but it'll still be that shape. It's the general wedge pintail shape, just they have super elongated center tail feathers that give them that long pintail on the drakes. That white neck stands out big time. Not too many ducks have a lot of white on them, especially the neck. That makes their brown head really stand out. And again, kind of like the shovelers, it almost makes their head look like it's floating out in front of the duck. Pintail's pretty nondescript on the back. You'll see that their speculum, most of the time, it's hard to see the coloration to it. When you get that in your hand and you move it around, it could be anything from like a tannish color to a greenish color. So really cool, different speculum than any of the other ducks. Really kind of nondescript on the back, but just a really acute bird. And that shape is all you need to know to ID it. Tough bird to hunt for sure. One of the toughest. And now I think we're on teal. There we go. So the reason we have a special teal season is because of this bird right here. This is the second most common duck by our waterfowl counts in North America, but almost all of the population of blue-winged teal are out of Illinois before the start of duck season. So enter the early teal season for a lot of the Midwestern states to take advantage of this plentiful duck that is a tasty duck, that's a fun duck to hunt. But guess what? Unlike all the other ducks, this one is not waiting for cold weather. As soon as the days start getting short in late August, early September, boom, this bird is moving, going through. And they do not last long here in Illinois or really anywhere in the Midwest. If we get them for a day or 2 or 3, we're doing pretty good. Fleeting by nature, the blue-winged teal, but this is what they look like later in the year. So we'll never see that white crescent moon in early teal season. Just doesn't exist. All the birds are going to look more like these hens. And really, that's what you're looking for, a small, nondescript looking duck. And when I say small, these are much smaller than mallards. Mallards average 2.5 to 3 pounds. And blue-winged teal more average in the, we're talking ounces, like 13, 14, 15 ounces, somewhere in there. So less than a pound, quite a bit smaller than mallards. Fairly nondescript, but none of these have their wings open. They do have a big blue patch on the front of their wing, a lot like the widgeon has that big white patch on the front of their wing. And it's really similar to the shoveler's wing pattern, just a little bit smaller. So nice big blue wing patch that does stand out even early in the year, even on the females. And then behind that they have a small green speculum. Let's listen to what they sound like here. So yeah, that's like the male peeps. The female has a very high-pitched quack that sounds like a mallard that just like inhaled a helium balloon kind of thing. Um, but yeah, blue-winged teal, fairly nondescript when they're on the water or standing because usually when they're doing that, you can't see that blue wing patch at all, and that's their easiest thing to kind of pick them out. The hardest duck probably to ID is between the hen blue-winged teal and the hen green-winged teal, which is this next bird right here. But if we were to open up the wings, you'd see that it gets much simpler because green-winged teals don't have any blue patch at all on their wing. They've got the green speculum with white on the trailing edge and then that buffy tan on the leading edge. And to me, that buffy tan on the leading edge of their speculum, which I didn't put an arrow on it, I should have, but the buffy on the leading edge of their speculum, that stands out really well in flight. I put an arrow on the vertical white bar on their shoulder. That stands out really good too. Sometimes though you can't see that in flight as well as you can sitting on the water. Sitting on the water you can see that white bar from a long ways out, and that's diagnostic for a drake green-winged teal. The hens don't have that, but this is our smallest puddle duck, so they're even an ounce or ounce and a half smaller than the blue-winged teal. So we're talking about a really small duck, and look at that shape. Even though he does have the prototypical fan-shaped tail, this is a small, tiny, little compact duck. When you see a green-winged teal, you generally think, wow, am I looking at a baby duck? You know, because they look so much smaller than all the other ducks you see. And nope, not a baby. That's just a full-grown green-winged teal. That's all he's got. And that to me is usually the best way to tell them. When you see a puddle duck that looks so small that it gives the impression of being adorable, you're probably dealing with a green-winged teal. And what do they sound like if we listen to these yet here? Again, that's the drake making the whistle. But they'll have the pitch quiet. But the whistle is almost like for greenwing. It sounds like a cross between the pintail and the blue-winged teal. So the blue-winged teal a little less raspy. The pintail's kind of got that roll with it, and the green-winged teal's right in between the two.
Kind of sounds like a metal detector, like that little like beep beep.
We've struck gold. Nope, just a green-winged teal. One of the tenderest of the ducks, I might add. This is a good one that when I would make a duck pate, so like grind up, or not grind, but use a blender and blend the ducks into like something you can dip your crackers into, green-winged teal are a great choice for that. But now we're into diving ducks, and why not start with the king, the canvasback. Wow, just an awesome, beautiful bird. At some points in the year, there's usually most of the continent's population is not too far north of us on the Mississippi River in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So pretty cool bird. Our first diving duck, so they have smaller wing to their body size, but look at that shape. The shape of the head is super diagnostic on the canvasbacks, and this is whether it's a drake or a hen. It looks like a scooter ramp. So if you were riding your scooter and you hit that bill, you could just continue riding your scooter over the bill, over the head, and jump right over their forehead and hopefully land safely in the water behind them. Looks like a nice little ramp there. Keep that in mind because we're gonna look how that is different on the redhead. But another diagnostic thing with the canvasback is canvasback. Look how it's just really uniformly not quite white, but almost white across the back, kind of like canvas or off-white. So that's how they get their name. That's the drakes only. that are purely almost white across the back. The females, that one in front of them, they're a much more tannish, dingy color. 'Cause again, most of the females, they have to have cryptic coloration because these are the ones that are guarding the nest. Male doesn't have to worry about that. He can just be pretty, and the female's got to do all the hard work. So she can't be too pretty. And no sounds on these. Most of the divers are not very vocal, so sounds are not going to help you. But now look at this redhead. Again, we've got a diver duck that's got a reddish head, and it's got some black and some tan. How are you supposed to tell this from a canvasback? Well, now pretend you're on your little mini scooter and try to take your scooter off the redhead, and you're probably not going to have as fun of a time. I feel like if you ride your scooter over that bill and hit the forehead, that's a wreck waiting to happen. So a really abrupt slope from the bill to the forehead. That's a huge diagnostic feature for redhead. You know you're dealing with a redhead, not a canvasback. Now you can also look at the bill, a little bit different. You can also look at the back. Remember, the canvasback was kind of uniformly close to white. Redhead is not close to white at all, much closer to gray or even like a bluish gray, a lot more dingy, a little bit smaller, but that head shape is really a great thing to look at. And look at the female. Female's got the same head shape. The hardest thing to ID between a hen redhead is a hen ring neck. So hen ring necks look very similar to hen redheads, very similar bill and everything. Just a ring neck is going to have tones of black right here, and the redhead had tones of reddish buffy. So a little bit different. Ring necks are much more common across most of Illinois. So most of what you get is going to be ring necks, but that is probably the toughest out of all our common ducks to ID is hen redhead versus hen ring neck. So get a good view of that hen redhead there. Nice white eye ring, really buffy reddish all around, and fades to white at the lower part of the head. And now we'll go back to our ring neck. And she is dark, and especially notice how really dark at the top of the head. She's got the white eye ring, but it kind of goes into a teardrop shape, or it's kind of extended back there towards the back. And then because her head is so dark, it really looks like she's got kind of a white milk mustache right around her bill there. Much darker, much more black than the hen ring net or the hen redhead. Now the drake, unmistakable. He does not look like a redhead at all, obviously. But most people look at that and they're like, why the heck do they call this a ring neck duck? He does actually have a brown ring around its neck. Hard to see. You will hear some duck hunters call these ring bills because they do have an easier to see ring around their bill, which of course I've got an arrow pointing at there. But I feel like the pattern on a ring neck is reminiscent of a Nike swoosh. So if you see that Nike swoosh and you see a duck with an angular head, like ring necks always have a weird shaped head. It always does not look like, if I was drawing a duck, I would never draw a duck head like that, just saying. Always have weird shaped heads for some reason. Another diagnostic thing about ring neck is the brightest white on their side is always right at their scapular or shoulder region. So it's bright white at the front and it fades to dingy white in the back. They're the only diver duck or anything like that that does that. You got one picture there of their outstretched wing. Does look pretty similar to a bluebill or a scop wing, which we'll see here soon, but look how it's uniformly gray at the tip. So it's kind of real dark gray up at the leading edge of the wing, and then the secondaries and the primaries fade to that light gray that's pretty much uniformly light gray all across there. Now these birds do not have a true speculum because these are not puddle ducks. So they do have different colored feathers at the bottom of their secondaries than the top, but it's not not a speculum. It's not iridescent on the diving ducks. Now, what do we got next here? I think it's scop. Yep. And we combine these into greater or lesser scop because for ID purposes for hunting, that's what we can do. I will tell you how to ID them apart from one another, but basically, how do you tell it's a scop? Well, first off, you'll hear a lot of people call these bluebills, and most of these are because people have a hard time saying scop. I mean, look at that word. If you never heard it before, how would you pronounce it? You know, is that a skyup? Yeah, anyway. So
I
people
always
call
try to
them
do scalp.
bluebills because it scalp. Yeah,
Scalp. I mean,
scalp.
that's how it's spelled.
It's
Scalp.
a weird word. It's a weird word. But I think it's fun to say. So I say scalp. But anyway, a lot of the old timers will call them blue bills because look at the bill. It's kind of a uniformly blue bill, and that stands out against the ring neck, or what some people will call ring bill, because they do have a very obvious ring on their bill. Now here we've got hen and drakes. Now the hen scop are real nice because unlike the hen ringnecks, the hen scop have that super bright milk mustache. So unmistakable on the scop, and that's on greater and lesser scop. The greater scop, mostly a black and white bird. They do have iridescence in the head. That's a little bit different between the lesser and the greater. In the lesser, I feel like it's more greenish iridescence, but remember that changes. In the greater scop, it's more purplish. The best ways to tell them apart is going to be the head shape and then the white on the wing. So you see I've got that pointer. Now remember back to the ring neck wing, it was uniformly gray across the trailing edge of those primaries and secondaries. Now in the scop, it's not like that anymore. In the lesser scop, it's half white and half gray. So the lesser scop, the secondaries are pretty much white there in their trailing edge, and then the primaries are more of a dingy gray, which is more reminiscent of the ring neck, but a little bit darker. Now, greater scop, the picture in the top right, that white actually goes into the primaries. So that bright white goes beyond the secondaries and actually goes halfway into the primaries. So all these ducks have 10 primaries. They'll probably have 5, 6, 7 of them that have true white on it rather than just that dingy gray. That's going to tell you it's a greater scop. If you don't see the wings open, and again, remember, you don't have to ID greater or lesser when you're hunting, but if you do want to know if you're birding or after you get the bird in your hand, the head shape can also let you know what it is. It's said that the highest point of a lesser scop, it should be when it's sitting or standing, the highest point is usually on the back of the head. And a greater scop kind of look like they have a bulbous head, and so the highest point is usually right at the front of the head, so towards the eye, right at the front of the bill. Not super clear in these pictures because they're flying, but if they were sitting on the water, usually that shape can help you out too. Also, there's more extensive black on the tip of the nail of the greater scop, which is the tip of the bill. But again, these are minute things. Hunting purposes, just know it's a scop and you're good enough.
There you go.
Oh, I forgot I threw that in there. Look at that. See? Got that bulbous head almost like, what's the whale? It's escaping me right now. Beluga.
Beluga.
Yeah. The old greater scop looks like he's got a beluga forehead. And then the lesser scop, he's got kind of a little mohawk there. Lesser scop is much more common. Also, it's going to be earlier migrant. Greater scop we're not usually going to get until much later in the year. A little bit bigger bird too. Nice pictures. All right, now we're getting into the sea duck. So again, most people are just going to call them diver ducks, but there is a little bit of a difference between the golden eyes and the buffleheads and the other ducks we just talked about, because these And I know you're saying, hey, where's the sea in Illinois? Well, we don't have one, but these are called sea ducks because they're mostly black and white ducks and they have a 2-year sexual maturity. So all those other ducks, the drakes and the hens, are going to look different their very first fall. When it comes to golden eyes and buffleheads, the first fall for their males, the males look like the females. They're not sexually mature. So in that picture in the top left, you see two beautiful drakes, and then you see what you think are two hens, but actually, if you look at that, it looks like it's probably one drake and one hen, because that leading one that looks like a hen is probably a first year drake. See how he has a little bit more white on his wing? Probably a first year drake, and I'm not 100% sure on that, but probably a first year drake, and that trailing one is going to be an actual hen. But a lot of people will call these whistlers because their wings, just because of their shape, when they beat their wings, they actually whistle pretty loud. We don't have a good example of that, but the first time you hear it, you'll remember it and be like, okay, now every time I hear that, I'm going to know that's a goldeneye, and it is diagnostic to them. Males and the females both very diagnostic. There's no other bird that looks like that. The only other bird that does look like that is Barrow's goldeneye, which would be extremely unlikely in Illinois. But if you do get one, that would absolutely be a trophy bird. That's a Alaska, Canada, like Washington, Pacific Northwest type of bird. I'd never heard of one in Illinois, but I'm sure it's happened. Really late bird. We're not going to see these until towards the end of our season, and a lot of times on big water only, and just with all that black and white, very striking bird, and almost unmistakable. And hey, they got a nice golden eye, which almost like their name makes sense. Sometimes it works out like that. It's nice when it does. And after these, we got their little cousin, these little butterball ducks. These are just a gorgeous little bird. This is a teal-sized bird, so this is kind of the diving duck, and again, sea duck, really equivalent of the teal. So about the same size, a little bit bigger than teal, but they look that size, especially because look at those little bitty wings. How does that thing even fly with those little chicken wings? I don't know, but they do fly. And they're fun to watch. You see them in big groups. We do get them pretty commonly in Illinois. And this, if you ever hunt ponds or big lakes and hunt a point, this is a common bird that you just get past shooting, and sometimes they're in big flocks. The toughest thing is because it's a diver, if you do knock some down that are only crippled, it can take a while to finish them off, because they'll dive up just enough to get a breath and then dive under the water. So you can be there like, I don't know if you ever saw the Three Stooges when they're after ducks, but it's a little bit like that when you're watching your buddy try to finish off a crippled bufflehead. But very unmistakable. It's the only bird that has that huge, like, white triangle shape on the back of its head. A bulbous head for how little the bird is. Got those big pink feet, and again, like the goldeneye, 2-year sexual maturity. So even in that picture on the bottom right, some of those that look like hens are actually first-year drakes, and it looks like maybe that first one is definitely a first-year drake. Looks like he's got a little bit bigger, heavier bill, and then that female that's right in front of the drake that I've got the picture on, she looks like a true female. The bufflehead. And let's see. So, and as far as like climate change affecting duck migration, I mean, it's going to be hard to notice anything like that, because what has affected migration on the Mississippi Flyway or in any flyway more than anything, and I think most people would agree with this, at least to this current moment, is going to be basically the habitat management done by the states. So if you go back 60, 70 years ago, migration was way, way different for both ducks and geese. And one reason was we didn't have all these parks and golf courses that basically became really great goose habitat, and all the geese basically became residents. I shouldn't say all, we still have our migrating geese, but goose hunters used to only have the migrating geese to go for. And the refuge system, there really wasn't that many. So all the ducks and geese were competing over natural food sources. They were flying further to find food sources. They were going different places. Anyway, fast forward to today, most of these are success stories, but we have so many good refuges with so much good food that the ducks don't really have to go anywhere for a long time. And this is where you could say, maybe climate change plays in, like maybe it allows them to stay further north. But even if it doesn't, like right now, we're getting into duck season, and a lot of these ducks are stacked up further north because they've got no reason to go. We know it is going to freeze in the Dakotas eventually, but it hasn't happened yet. Hopefully next week. And so it actually does take a hard freeze to physically push those ducks down, whereas 50, 60 years ago, it wasn't like that because, and some of this is bad, but maybe there was not as high quality grain or high quality food available for them, so they just had to go further to find the food they needed to survive. So I think that's changed the migration more than anything else, is just the food availability. But I'm sure there's something. The weather definitely impacts, especially here in the Midwest. It's more of how quick are they going to get here, and then how quick are they going to leave. A lot of times a mild winter could be good for us in Illinois as long as the ducks get here, but then it's kind of good for duck hunters if it doesn't get so cold that it freezes them out and pushes them further south. So who knows? One of those things, six one way, half a dozen the other. But all that food up north, that's affected it, I think, more than anything else to date. And as far as what I would buy, like if I was getting into waterfowl hunting myself in Illinois, I feel like in Illinois, more so than most states, you really do need a boat. It's going to open up so much more hunting possibilities to you. So that'd be my first big purchase, other than getting, obviously, you got to have at least a minimum of 6 decoys in a lot of these public areas you go to. So you got to have that. Beyond that, though, a boat is going to open up way more hunting possibilities for you than anything else. And if you can get some kind of camo colored boat that you could put some of that fake grass on to really make it like a layout boat, I mean, you're going to be in real good shape, because you can use that not only as a boat to access areas, but then you can also use it as a way to hide. So, and as far as the most cost-effective access to waterfowl hunting, I'm pretty much in Illinois, it is tough. We haven't, just to be honest, we haven't 100% figured it out. We've gone on several duck hunts in Illinois, and we have not had a huge amount of success. So we're still trying to work on that. But what I can tell you is, growing up in Missouri, it was very cost effective for me to get into waterfowl hunting, because the only thing that I needed to buy that I didn't have was a duck stamp and waders. There was no, well, and I guess non-toxic shot, but I've got that for other reasons now too. But in Missouri, we didn't have any decoy minimum or anything like that, so I didn't need that. And I had a lot of shallow water marshes that pump water in, so I didn't need a boat. So I started when I was in high school on my own, buying the cheapest waders I could get from Walmart. I think at that time they were like $20 canvas waders, which were horribly uncomfortable, but they got me out there hunting. I picked up some paper mache decoys at a garage sale for probably $5 and threw them in an old military sack that, once it got wet, weighed about 200 pounds. So anyway, I did everything wrong, but I got everything I needed to duck hunt for literally like I think less than 25 or 30 bucks. Of course, this was whatever 30 years ago almost, so prices are a little bit different, but it was really not expensive for me to get into duck hunting. And some of my first duck hunts I limited out on. So even with the crappy equipment I had, I went out and I had success. So it honestly might be a little bit harder in Illinois, just to be honest, but you can duck hunt without having hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of dollars of equipment. It can be done for sure. Ruddy duck. This is one a lot of duck hunters never even see. This is the middle of your pond duck. They don't look like this in our duck season. This is one of the latest ducks to fully plume up, and in fact, they don't even look like this in the picture here, the drake, until probably getting into summertime. But what they do always do, stiff-tailed duck, they've got that tail sticking straight up. So anytime you see a small duck, a little raft of small ducks sitting out there in the middle of the lake, and you see a lot of them have that tail sticking up so they almost look like a U, those are ruddies. Those are ruddy ducks. I've never shot one. If one came in, I don't think I would want to shoot it. I have no reason to shoot it. They don't look very good. I don't think they're tasty. They're not particularly, yeah, it just doesn't interest me in any way, so I can't tell you a whole lot about it other than it's a cool bird that we have, and it's our one representative of the stiff-tailed ducks that we have around here, so kind of cool for that. Really interesting courtship, so they are fun to watch in the late spring and early summer, but as far as hunting, I've never had one come in to the decoys, so, you know, is what it is. Clown-like appearance. And then the mergansers, speaking of birds that I don't really want to shoot. For mergansers, it's another reason. I guess if I had a really beautiful specimen came in and I wanted to mount it, well, there you go. There's a reason to take one potentially, but not known for being good food-wise, because these are strictly piscivores. Look at that bill. We're talking about different than all the other duck bills. Now that is a bill for catching fish and all kinds of little squiggly things under the water. That's what these birds are eating. Since they do that, and since they are kind of a long-lived bird, they tend to kind of bioaccumulate heavy metals, PCBs, other bad things that are in the water that we don't want. So this is one that I would say eat with caution. Personally, I pass them up. Like I said, when I used to hunt, we call them lawn darts because they got the skinny little beak there. They look like lawn darts, and we would pass them up. You do what you want, but definitely eat them in moderation, and all three are possible in Illinois. Hooded mergansers actually can nest here, so you could see them at any time of year. Later in the year is when we get the common mergansers, and then red-breasted mergansers would be the least common, but is possible. I have seen them around, and the red-breasted mergansers, other than having the red breast on the drakes, they have a much more needle-like bill than the common mergansers, so that's the best way to tell their females apart. Needle-like bill in the red-breasted mergansers, a thicker, stronger bill in the common mergansers, and then the hoodeds are not only smaller, but they look much different than both of the others, so pretty easy to tell those apart. Eat them in moderation if you so desire, or else you'll get that Mad Hatter's disease. Not good. Okay, the old Canada goose. Everybody knows what this bird looks like. Some of you have probably been chased to your car by him even. But we have two very distinct populations. The populations are distinct because they are so different that they're even different in their outcomes. The resident Canada geese are doing so good, they're basically steadily increasing over almost all of the country, whereas the migratory population is kind of stable to even decreasing in some places. So different fates for the two birds here. And we will get into snow geese here in just 1 second. But we do got a sound. I know you know what they sound like, but we might as well hear it again. Why not? Branta canadensis. typical Canada goose sounds, it's that two note. You pay attention to that two note. It starts off brr, starts off low, and then it breaks over into that high pitched honk. Prototypical for our Canada goose. Now we'll look at our next one. And of course, they all look different. This looks different, but if you're hunting and you're only seeing silhouettes, a lot of times you hear them before you can see the difference. So let's go ahead and play this call and listen to what the white-fronted goose sounds like. Notice how we don't have that two-pitch thing anymore. It doesn't start off as a growl and then break off into the honk. It starts as the high-pitched honk. Also, generally the white-fronted geese, or most people around here call them speckle bellies, which is obvious as you look at that bird there, mature bird. They've got that black speckling all across their bellies there. The young birds won't have that though. They've also, their true name is white-fronted goose. That's the white, basically milk mustache that's around their bill. That's always there. But that sound, very diagnostic. They're very noisy. If you hear that, you know you're dealing with white fronts or speckle bellies. This bird is generally pretty callable if we see them and they're around looking for a place to land. That being said, a lot of times in the fall, they fly over the Midwest without landing. They do stay here longer in the spring when we can't hunt them, but in the fall, this is one bird that's notorious for leaving its nesting ground on the tundra and just making a beeline for its wintering ground without hardly stopping. So if you do get a chance, this is, I think, the best to eat goose that is out there, and just listen for that high-pitched honk that goes right into the honk, and it's usually that three-pitched thing. So you'll hear three distinct different honks, but it'll be a lot of geese playing at once, so they sound cool, and a lot of them are together. I banded these up in Alaska, so I love white-fronted geese. Special place in my heart. Cool bird. And now the old snow goose. Same species, lesser snow goose. They got blue phase. That still counts as a snow goose. We'll talk about Ross's here in a second. But snow geese, let's listen to them now. They don't have the growl. So it's not a two-note honk like the Canada goose. There's no growl. They go right into the honk. But unlike the white-fronted goose, which had three separate, basically, parts to its honk to give it a three-note, sound like three different notes, snow goose just sounds like the same note over and over again. Like they don't know any songs. They just know one thing, and everybody in their group's just going to keep calling out that one word. That's snow geese. Not the most musical of birds, but, they are very numerous. And this is the bird that's very famous for being in such large populations in their breeding grounds around Hudson Bay that they denude the taiga and the Arctic tundra in a way that devastates the ecosystem. So that's why we have special conservation seasons to try to knock those populations down. Even with those seasons, they have had to go up and bomb them while they're nesting to try to reduce their populations, but the conservation seasons do help a little bit. And as far as snow goose hunting in Illinois, we have not 100% figured that out either. We went on, well, I should say Dan and a couple people went with outfitters last year, and they didn't fire a shot. So even going with outfitters, it's hit or miss, but I know the hot spot in Illinois is probably around Havana, around Imaquan. So any outfitter around there is going to be a good bet. If you're willing to travel, I would suggest Northwest Missouri around Squaw Creek is probably one of the best places in the country nearby to here. Going down to Texas is probably even better, a little further away. But snow geese is one of the things outfitters usually the best way to try to hunt them because it's most people don't have permission on the they're going to be using grain fields and they're only going to be there for a few days to a couple weeks moving through, and you need lots and lots of decoys. So pretty hard for the common person to hunt snow geese any which way other than going with an outfitter. It's just a hard one to do it. You can try it with a small spread if you got permission, and hopefully you can have some luck, but much harder than ducks or Canada geese to hunt on your own, in my opinion, anyway. All right, what else we got here? That's all the ducks and geese, I think.
Did you go through the Ross's goose?
Oh, whoops, no, not yet. Sorry, I forgot about
Poor
him.
guy.
Yeah, I say he's always getting forgotten about. So as far as your limits are concerned, they just count them as light geese or white geese. So your Ross's geese are going to count with your snow geese, which of course your blue geese are in there too. But how do you tell them apart? Well, your Ross's goose is much smaller than a snow goose. Snow goose averages 6 to 8 pounds. Ross's goose is about half that size at about 3 to 3.5 pounds, so about the size of a big mallard. But the best way to tell is look at that short little stubby bill without the grin patch. So that's a snow goose in the foreground on the right. It's got that black grin patch on their pink bill. Makes it look like they're kind of smiling, but also looking down on you like you're a lesser life form. And Ross's goose, it looks more happy to see you, like friendly, like hey, that looks like a fun guy to go to the pub with, right? No grin patch on the Ross's goose. Much less common. They usually are on the outskirts. If you see a big flock of like 1,000 snow geese, look on the edges. You can usually pick out a couple Rosses on the edges there without the grin patch. Sorry, Rosses, I almost forgot you. Now, some videos. Here's a little quiz time. Now, if you are feeling brave, you can put your guess in the chat. If not, we'll talk about the answers afterward. But let's hit play. And I'm not going to say anything about this bird, but try to decide. Is this a puddle duck? Is this a diving duck? And then what do you think it is? What stands out to you about this bird? It's from Chicago, Illinois. Local, that's nice. No sound. So you don't have any sound to help you with. They kind of look nondescript. But to me, they look like they got pretty big wings. I feel like if I took one of those wings, I could cover up the whole body. Yep, I see puddle duck, definitely puddle duck. Another thing that stands out is when I start to see the back of them, I'm seeing what looks like almost like a white square. Looks like a very particular square. It might be a rectangle. I'm also seeing dark black butts on some of those birds. So all these things together are telling us that is our friend the gadwall. Gadwall. This is a whole flock of gadwall. Kind of a nondescript bird. But the folks that guess puddle duck, you're absolutely right. Puddle duck with those big wings. So you see that, and then you see that they got that white square. Couple that with that dark butt. Gadwalls all the way. Here's another one on the water for you. Let's say this one snuck into your decoys and landed. Uh-oh, now you got to decide, what is it? Oh, look at that bill. If it stops moving there. Kind of looks pretty uniformly bluish. Got that real nice bright white mustache that stands out big time. No question about that. No question. Dark otherwise. but sitting low in the water. So we didn't see it flying, but that's telling me this is probably a diving duck. Probably a diving duck. And all those things together, that was a scot. All right, now we've got a bunch of different ducks here. So let's look through here and we're just going to see what we can find. So we're seeing some black and white ducks. So right in the middle, that's a different duck that popped up. We're seeing some head shapes in some of those ducks. Wow, pretty cool. And we'll watch this a second time and I'll point out what's what. So can you play that one more time, Lauren? All right, we're seeing a lot of canvasbacks. Look at that shape of that head. You can see it before she even hits play. Canvasback, that's all you need to see is the shape of that head. Now I like this because Scop's, look at that, Scop, real bulbous. And then a ring neck pops up and you see how he's got that Nike swish? He's a little bit different than those Scop, isn't he? We've got a lot of canvasbacks swimming around. We've got a lot of Scop. That's probably a greater Scop, big one there. That's a good prototypical raft of divers. A lot of times they are going to be mixed.
We had two guesses, correct guesses.
Nice. Good work. Okay, how about this beautiful specimen here? I want to see one of these this year. Oh man, that kind of looks like a mallard, but look at that speculum. There is no white around that speculum whatsoever. Now wait a minute. Hen mallard's not supposed to have a yellow bill. What's going on here?
We have a black duck
Yeah,
guess.
right answer is beautiful. Black duck. Yeah, that's one I would love to get this year. If I do get one, I'm going to save that one to get mounted. Beautiful, beautiful video there.
Do we want to do one more video?
Yeah, we got one more here.
Well, we've got a couple, but
Oh yeah. I think they might be short. Yeah, here's a bunch of them in flight. Let's see. Bunch of birds. Look at this. This is how a lot of times you might see big flock of birds get up. Are they all the same thing? Or are they different things? What's in there? What stands out? Oh man. I am seeing a whole lot of my friend duck. Man, there's not too many ducks that are light in the front and then dark in the belly. That actually looks like it's all consistently the same duck. Kind of look like they had a big spatulate bill. That'll give it away. Those are shovelers. So when you see that with the white breast and then the dark chestnut belly, not even ducks, but not too many birds in general are darker on the belly than they are on the breast or elsewhere. There's just not many birds like that. So when they're coming right at you, you can't see much of anything. And then they start coming in and you're like, wow, I see some patches on the wing. And it looks weird having that white breast and then a dark belly. At least it does to me. It looks like something's wrong with that bird. But nothing's wrong with it. That's just our old friend, the shoveler. Some people will call them Hollywoods or smiley mallards. Those are just friendly ways of saying that people appreciate that duck, I think. Now what do we got? Let's see. Ooh, flying fast, erratically. Ooh, look at that canvasback shape on the water. It's just nice when you can tell by the quick. Now look at this. This is an elegant duck there. That duck looks elegant. Almost looks like the head's floating out in front. Wow. Just gorgeous. Yeah, I want to see some of this duck too. Now, this is one of my favorite ducks for a lot of different reasons, but look at how elegant they look. This is a big puddle duck. Hopefully everybody knows that it's a puddle duck. Large wings, deep wing beats. But you'll notice that everything about him is more graceful than most of the ducks we've seen. This is just a graceful, beautiful, elegant duck, and hopefully you've guessed it, this is our friend, the northern pintail. Hard duck to hunt, but a beautiful duck. I think the most beautiful and really one of my favorite ducks to eat. I can't explain it, but to me they taste more like beef than any of the other ducks, and I mean it is straight up like a ribeye steak when you get a good fat pintail and you cut off that breast meat skin on, leave the skin on, and you fry it medium rare on a hot skillet. Nobody's turning that down. But we can't talk about all these cool ducks without talking about the federal duck stamp, because this was initiated back in 1934. Franklin Roosevelt, awesome thing. This has been one of the best, like most cost efficient government programs ever initiated. So 98% of all the money that goes into federal duck stamps goes directly back to acquire and protect wetland habitat and to support everything about waterfowl. So 98%. It only cost about 2% for them to administer it, print the stamps and all that stuff, and 98% goes back. And earlier when I talked about all those refuges that are basically acting like duck sponges that collect all the ducks and just only let them out when cold weather pushes them. Most of these are paid for by the duck stamp. So awesome that it's self-funded. People that want to go out and hunt ducks buy this. It's really called the Migratory Bird Hunting and Conservation Stamp. You can get it at any first-class post office. You can also get them online now. But beautiful artwork on there. And really, beyond making it legal for you to hunt and beyond putting a bunch of dollars back into wetland habitat, which has been an awesome success story, you also get a little piece of Americana, a little piece of art that somebody worked really hard on. And the duck stamps are always just absolutely, I mean, awe-inspiring. If you're somebody that likes wildlife art, the duck stamps are second to none. Just gorgeous pieces of artwork there. So
And
always buy,
there's a whole
buy.
competition as well. Like the Curtis is kind of downplaying, like it's a big thing to have your artwork selected. So it's kind of fun to see some of the stuff people put in.
Yeah, they don't get paid anything. Like it's not like a money purse or anything. This is all pride. But yeah, like Lauren said, they get I don't know how many entries, but hundreds, if not thousands. And so the winner of the duck stamp, I mean that's their Super Bowl, you know? If you're a wildlife artist, that's your Super Bowl right there. So, always buy your duck stamp, and I always like to encourage people. I like to buy more than one because they do so good things. I started putting them on some of my Christmas presents. You know, I made my brother a handmade like piece of art, and I was like, yeah, what should I put on the back? And I went and bought a duck stamp and put it on the back. It's like, what better way to sign it? I put a duck stamp. I got the year on there, a little piece of art. I don't know. Anyway, I did it. You do what you want. Any questions? Probably some, right? Let's see. Oh, we'll hang out for a couple minutes if anybody thinks of any questions. If not, even if you think of them after we're signed off of this webinar, you all can always reach us. You can always reach us at our Learn to Hunt Gmail email account, and we also have a contact us button right on our webpage. Also, if you haven't already followed us on Facebook, Instagram, feel free to do that, and you can always reach out to us there. We definitely want to be your all's, mentor moving forward. It's duck ID and everything that goes into waterfowl hunting, much less all the other types of hunting. There's a lot that goes into it. Nobody can watch one little webinar and all of a sudden be an expert, so we don't expect you all to be that. Definitely, we want questions as they come up throughout the season. And then if you do go out and have some success, certainly share that with us too. We love to hear that as well. But we want to definitely try to be your mentor and your helper throughout your hunting journey. And don't be shy. There are no stupid questions. None at
We
all.
do we do have a question about when cooking duck, is there an internal cook temp difference between puddle and diver ducks?
Um, no, not no. And so what I will say is the USDA, I'm pretty sure they recommend standard, basically standard bird cooking temperatures, which is what, 165 or something. And I will say with ducks, I do not follow that. So I'm not encouraging you to not listen to USDA guidelines. I'm just saying that I do not. And Hank Shaw, who is my favorite wild game cook, he does not either, and he recommends in his book that you probably cook your ducks to more like medium rare, somewhere in that neighborhood of the 140 range.
Yeah,
So
usually as long as you're not immunocompromised, you're all right.
yeah, and even Hank Shaw says like ducks, they don't have nearly the amount of stuff that white meat, that chickens and turkeys get. Ducks don't have nearly all that stuff, not to mention rabbits and squirrels. So
Hmm.
ducks are a safer critter than a lot of these. Now there are some things, there's avian influenza, avian cholera, things that you gotta look for. But in general, in the wild, in Illinois, if you hunt a wild duck, that's a healthy duck. Because guess what? If it wasn't healthy, it wouldn't make it this far. Um, but I don't know of any difference between the cooking temp. I would do it the same. But as far as cooking it like a steak, like I said, medium rare, there's only certain ducks I'm going to do that with. I would not do it with a ring neck. Ring necks are generally not considered your best divers. So basically any puddle duck I would do like that. I don't usually do shovelers like that. You could, um, but I generally treat shovelers like I would ringnecks or scop, where I generally am taking them all and I'm making them into some kind of jerky or sausage type thing. Just because they're not the best ducks. And then the best ducks, which will be your canvasbacks, your redheads, your mallards, your pintails, your widgeon, your teal, your gadwall, basically any puddle duck except for shovelers. And sorry, shovelers, that might be my own personal bias, but all puddle ducks except for shovelers and canvasbacks and redheads. I would cut them off, keep the skin on, and my preferred way to do it is like a ribeye steak, where medium rare and you're eating them. Um, any of the other ducks, like I said, ringneck, scop, obviously bufflehead or goldeneye, and shovelers. Most of the time, I'm not worried if I keep the skin and the fat. I just want to get the meat off, and I'll either cube those up and make curry or something that's easy to disguise, or make them into jerky or sausage. That's me personally. But good questions, good group. Hopefully everybody is getting out. It's a beautiful time to be in the woods, in the marsh, and in the field. So definitely try to get outside, those of you that can. And cooler weather's coming. I just looked at the weather and it does look like it finally is going to freeze up in the Dakotas, maybe towards the end of next week. So I think the ducks are coming. They're on their way, hopefully. Their bags are packed. We can only hope. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll get the recording out pretty soon, so you can come back and watch this again, or any parts of it that you might want to come back and look at. And then all the folks that weren't able to join us can watch the recording as well. Thanks everybody.